Many of our citizens don't understand how a city budgets and how they look at both revenues and expenditures. A good example of that is the Mulligan's golf course and games. The city initially bought that property because they did not want it to be sold for development. They didn't want to have additional housing and office space. But as they bought that, they were really preventing the sewer district from them building a sewer plant at the gateway to our city, which was a great move. The challenge that we have with properties like Mulligan's is that technically it's what we call an enterprise fund. And so the general fund can fund into that and pay for some of the operational expenses and costs. But as we determine what the fee structure will be, which is one of the features of Mulligan's, it's very inexpensive for the locals to use. As that fee structure, if it becomes too profitable, it's very difficult to move that profit out of an enterprise fund back into the general fund because there are specific laws regarding that type of accounting in a government entity. So as we look at a Mulligan's, for instance, we've all heard the discord that has been going on for a number of years. Do we develop it? There were members of the council, mayors who wanted to sell it. There were others who saw the vision in keeping it. And so by keeping it, we now look at it and say, how do we maintain it? How do we improve it? And how do we give more access to it? It's like a park in the sense that not only does it have this profitable side of it, but we also need to have more access to the city. But we have to understand how those budgets work and how those enterprise funds work. Our water system, for instance, is an enterprise fund. Our sanitation, which is our garbage pickup, is an enterprise fund. And so we try to make them self-supportive, self-sufficient. And whenever possible, our city leaders need to make certain that that's happening. That as much as possible, it's not coming out of our general fund for those basic essential services, but it's being paid for by the fees that we pay. The other thing about fees is we have to be careful in transparency. We talk about lowering taxes. That's a key word that people love to hear at election time. Let's lower our taxes. Let's cut taxes. You have to ask yourself two questions. If you lower taxes, several things happen. Not that you can't lower taxes, but you have to be aware of the impacts. The first impact would be what services would have to be cut if you lower taxes. And if you could maintain the level of service that we need and lower taxes, that would be a good thing. The other thing you have to remember is that when you just simply say we're going to lower a tax, we could lower our taxes in South Jordan. We could drop that mill levy rate lower than it is currently, even though it's lower than it's ever been in the history of our city. But by dropping it, then what happens is you then begin to have hidden fees that will crop up. I was talking to a gentleman who's lived in the city for well over 30 years, and when he first moved into the city and built his new home for he and his family, they charged him an impact fee for $3,500 to help pay for a bridge. Now, had their property tax been a little higher, which it was high at that time anyway, because we had no sales tax revenues. We had very little property tax from commercial base. Then we would have seen that, but there wasn't that transparency. He was charged a fee for a bridge, which doesn't make sense at all because no one knows where it's going or where it's happening. And we need to be transparent in all of our financial dealings in the city. We as the citizens need to know where it's coming from and where it's going.